Imagine for a second that you are being slid into a functional MRI machine. It's loud, it's intensely claustrophobic, and honestly, for most of us, it is a profoundly anxiety-inducing experience.
Oh, totally. It's nerve-wracking.
Right, your heart rate ticks up, your mind just starts racing, and your fight or flight response is basically knocking at the door.
Right.
But recently, researchers put a 41-year-old monk into one of these machines. His name is Yungi Mingyur Rinpoche. And, well, what they saw in the scans completely shattered conventional neurobiology.
Yeah, it really forces us to rethink what the human brain is actually capable of. I mean, they were looking at his neural markers, evaluating the structural integrity of his brain, and neurologically speaking, his brain looked a full 10 years younger than his actual age.
Wait, 10 years? That's crazy.
Exactly. The gray matter density, the cortical thickness, it was literally the brain of a 30-year-old. But the anti-aging aspect wasn't even the most fascinating part of the data.
No. Then what was?
It was his executive control. Anyone who has ever tried to meditate knows there is a pretty rough friction period.
Oh, for sure. You sit down, close your eyes, and your brain just goes wild.
Right. For the first 10 to 15 minutes, you're making grocery lists, you're stressing over an awkward conversation from yesterday, or, I don't know, worrying about an email. It takes a lot of time for the brain's default mode network to actually quiet down.
But this monk didn't have that problem, did he?
Not at all. He had zero warm-up, period. The fMRI showed he could shift his brain into a state of profound, deep meditation almost instantaneously. He completely bypassed the friction.
The light switch effect.
Yeah.
That is just wild. And really, that is the crux of what we are pulling apart today in this deep dive.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
We are exploring the exact mechanisms behind this mindset. It's a framework forged by monks over thousands of years, but we're translating it into super practical, everyday tools for you. Because, I mean, monks are not a different species.
Right, they aren't born with some magical, serene genetics.
Exactly. Many of the monks operating at this high level were just ordinary people. They were biologists, finance workers, even circus performers. They were exposed to the exact same chaotic world we are.
But they just adopted a rigorous system to quiet the ego and, well, completely neutralize anxiety. And the accessibility of this framework is what makes it so vital for you listening right now.
You don't have to go live in a cave, basically.
No, not at all. You don't need to retreat to the Himalayas or sleep on a dirt floor to rewire your brain. It is a highly specific, trainable mindset. Think of it as a filtration system for the noise of the modern world.
And from our sources, this transformation really follows three distinct phases. You let go to clear the clutter, you grow to reshape your environment, and then you give to expand that purpose outward. Let's start with that first phase, letting go.
Yeah, the monk framework starts by confronting what is usually called the monkey mind.
Which we all have. Human beings process roughly 70,000 thoughts a day. 70,000. And evolutionary biology tells us those thoughts aren't mostly happy, positive affirmations.
No, they're threat assessments. We evolved to survive. So the monkey mind just swings wildly from fear to fear, constantly looking for danger.
It's a great survival mechanism if you are running from a tiger on the savannah. But it's a pretty terrible operating system for modern society.
Totally. The monkey mind is basically coasting in the passenger seat, looking for quick dopamine hits. It complains, it compares, it criticizes. It's entirely reactive.
Whereas the monk mind is proactive, it bypasses the symptom and digs straight to the root of an issue. But, before you can operate from the monk mind, you have to realize how heavily you've been programmed by external forces.
Right, and there is a brilliant quote from a sociologist named Charles Horton Cooley that completely reframes this. He said, "I am not what I think I am, and I am not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am."
Wow. That is the ultimate psychological hall of mirrors.
It really is. Our entire identity is essentially a projection of a projection. We build our lives around what the sources call OEOs, opinions, expectations, and obligations.
Like we absorb what our parents expected of us or what our friends think is successful.
Exactly, or what the social media algorithm dictates is valuable, and we weave all that into this bizarre Frankenstein monster of an identity. We're running on software we didn't even write.
We mistake the noise of the crowd for our own internal voice. The framework uses this great metaphor of a mirror covered in years of thick dust. When you first look into it, you don't see yourself. You just see the dust.
The OEOs. And clearing that dust requires a really aggressive, unfiltered look at your actual behavior. Not what you say you believe, but your empirical actions.
Which brings us to the life audit. This is where it gets a little uncomfortable.
Oh, definitely. The life audit forces you to look at the massive gap between what you say you value and how you actually spend your time and money.
Let's talk about the coffee example from the sources.
Yeah.
We all enthusiastically claim that our health is our absolute priority. But then you look at comparative spending.
Right. People will routinely drop $4 a day on a sugary coffee drink. That's roughly $1,500 a year. And the brain categorizes that as an absolute need.
But then if you suggest they spend an extra $1.50 a day to upgrade to fresh, healthy, organic food,
Yeah.
which is only like $550 a year, their brain triggers a scarcity response.
Yeah, they immediately say, oh, that's too expensive, I can't justify that. It completely exposes the gap between who we want to be and who we actually are.
And we do the exact same thing with our time. We claim family is our ultimate anchor.
But if we're honest, a 60-minute lunch obligation with our parents can feel like an agonizing eternity.
Right. While a 60-minute TV show just evaporates in seconds, we have to audit our time and money because those metrics simply do not lie. They reveal exactly what values we're running on by default.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit because it sounds a little isolating. If I'm supposed to aggressively audit my life and filter out every single expectation or opinion from my family and society, don't I just become incredibly selfish?
That is actually the most common friction point when people first hear this. But the goal is not isolation. Monks are not just locking themselves in a void and ignoring everyone.
Okay, so what are they doing?
They are implementing a conscious filtration system. You evaluate the underlying drivers of your choices. Are you being propelled by lower values or higher values?
Lower values being things like greed, anger, envy.
Exactly. The survival-based, ego-driven stuff. The desperate need for external validation. When those lower values drive you, they inevitably drag you toward anxiety and depression.
And the higher values are things like compassion, gratitude, and service.
Right. So when you filter out the noise, you aren't ignoring people. You are simply noticing when a lower value, like the fear of missing out from Instagram, is dictating your weekend. And you consciously choose to pivot toward a higher value instead.
So to figure out what we actually value, we really have to stop letting negativity and fear hijack our brains. And the physical toll of negativity is just staggering.
It really is. We tend to view complaining as just harmless venting, just blowing off steam.
But it's biologically destructive. Complaining is literally contagious. It triggers mirroring neurons in whoever's listening to you. And chronic complaining floods your system with cortisol.
Which is terrible for you. Sustained cortisol exposure literally causes dendritic atrophy in the hippocampus.
Meaning it shrinks your brain.
Yes, exactly. The hippocampus is the critical center for learning, memory, and reasoning. So when you indulge in chronic negativity, you aren't just in a bad mood, you are quite literally dissolving your brain's physical capacity to reason logically.
You are actively shrinking your cognitive bandwidth. It is biological self-sabotage.
To break that cycle, the monk framework offers a radical shift in perspective on how we view other people. It's called the hospital of humanity analogy.
I love this one. It's so disarming.
It really is. Think about it. If you walk into a hospital ward, you do not feel anger toward a patient for being sick. You don't judge them for their symptoms.
Right, you recognize they are suffering from an ailment.
Exactly. The senior monks teach that the entire world is a hospital, and every single person you interact with is sick with something. They might be suffering from the disease of ego or envy or profound insecurity.
Don't judge someone with a different disease than you. That is such a powerful takeaway.
Precisely. When someone cuts you off in traffic or snaps at you at work, your default monkey mind takes it as a personal attack. But the monk mind views it as just a symptom of their specific illness.
It makes no sense to judge someone just because their suffering looks different from yours. But how does that translate practically? If I have a hypernegative coworker, I can't just diagnose them and float away on a serene cloud.
Well, you manage it through energetic boundary setting. First, you shift into being an objective observer. You recognize that their toxicity is a temporary symptom, not their core identity. Hurt people.
Their suffering is just overflowing onto you.
Exactly. Second, you physically and emotionally limit your exposure. You don't engage in the drama, you just back away. But the most proactive tool is the 25-75 principle.
The dilution strategy.
Yeah.
So for every one highly negative person you are forced to interact with, like a boss or a relative, you deliberately surround yourself with 3 uplifting people.
Yes. You essentially dilute the toxic exposure with a 75% concentration of positive influence. But, we can't just blame external forces either. We generate a lot of our own negativity.
Oh, absolutely. And there's this hilarious reality check from the sources about life inside an ashram. We always picture monks meditating in perfect harmony, floating above petty grievances.
Right, but you pack a bunch of human beings into tight living quarters, give them a strict 4-minute window to shower, and human nature just takes over.
They're secretly timing each other in the showers, getting annoyed if someone took 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And my absolute favorite detail, they were rating each other's snoring on a motorcycle scale.
Yes. Like, oh, this monk over here is a subtle Vespa, but the guy next to me is a full-blown Harley-Davidson engine.
It proves that the human brain will look for something to complain about, no matter where you are. But the intervention is the key. When one monk found himself constantly criticizing the others, his teacher gave him a strict mandate.
Right. For every single negative criticism he made about another monk, he had to sit down and identify 10 positive qualities about that exact same person.
10 to 1. That's a steep ratio.
It is, but the underlying mechanism isn't just about making him play nice. It is forced neuroplasticity. The brain has a natural negativity bias. It acts like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones, just to keep us alive.
So by forcing his brain to hunt for 10 positive traits, he was interrupting that default neural pathway. He was breaking his own feedback loop of cynicism.
Exactly. And for us, dealing with our own internal complaints, that cognitive intervention is streamlined into a really simple 3-step protocol. Spot, stop, swap.
It essentially functions like rapid-fire cognitive behavioral therapy. Let's walk through the mechanics. Phase 1 is spot. You have to cultivate enough awareness to notice a toxic impulse the millisecond it arises.
Like catching yourself thinking, I hope they fail, or I'm just going to complain about this all day.
Exactly. Then phase 2 is stop, which honestly is the hardest part. You don't repress the thought, but you pause and interrogate it. Why is my brain doing this right now? Am I actually angry, or am I just tired and projecting?
And then phase 3 is swap. You actively hijack the pathway. You replace the complaint with a moment of neutral observation or gratitude.
Spot the trigger, stop the momentum, swap the response.
And we really cannot underestimate the importance of spotting the small triggers. The Dalai Lama captured this perfectly. He said, if you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito.
I love that analogy.
Our daily negative thoughts are exactly like that. A passing jealous thought, a tiny grievance, they seem totally insignificant. But if you let a single mosquito into your net, it will relentlessly rob you of your peace all night long.
You have to spot the mosquito, stop it, and swap it out before it breeds.
Yeah.
But, if we trace all this negativity back to its origin point, the root cause almost always comes down to fear.
Yep. And fear is entirely predicated on attachment. We are terrified of losing things we think we possess.
Which is an illusion, because we possess absolutely nothing. The monk paradigm utilizes the concept of Hotel Earth to explain this.
There's an ancient story that encapsulates this perfectly. A wandering monk walks into a king's opulent palace and asks the guards for a room in the hotel.
The king's obviously furious. He comes down and says, "This is not a hotel, this is my ancestral palace."
And the monk just looks at him and asks, who owned this building before you? The king says, my father, but he is dead. The monk asks, and who owned it before him?
His father.
Right. So the monk smiles and says, so people check in, they stay for a little while, and then they leave forever. Sounds exactly like a hotel to me.
It totally dismantles the concept of ownership. We don't own our houses, our jobs, or even our relationships. We are just renting them for a brief, undetermined amount of time.
And when you truly internalize that every single thing in your life is temporary and borrowed, that white-knuckle grip of fear starts to loosen. You shift from fearing loss to just having profound gratitude for your current lease.
And once you extract that fear of loss, you can actually examine what is driving your behavior. Psychologically, there are 4 foundational motivations: fear, desire, duty, and love.
Fear and desire are the lower-tier, ego-driven ones. Duty and love are the higher-tier, expansive drivers. But we are incredibly good at lying to ourselves about which one is actually in the driver's seat.
We constantly masquerade desire as love or fear as duty. To bypass our own self-deception, the sources suggest an analytical tool called the why ladder. It's basically a process of aggressive questioning to hit the bedrock of your motivation.
Let's run a simulation of that for the listener. Say someone declares, I want to sail solo around the world.
Okay, so you ask the first why. Why do you want to do that? They might say, because I want to prove I'm an elite sailor.
Then you ask the second why. Why do you need to prove that? Because I want the respect of the sailing community.
Third why. Why do you want their respect? Because when people admire me, I feel valuable. Boom. Bedrock.
Exactly. The motivation isn't a genuine love for the ocean. The motivation is desire and ego. The whole trip is just a really complicated way to seek external validation.
But take the exact same goal. I want to sail solo around the world. Why? Because my father loved the ocean but died before he could make the trip.
Why? Because I want to honor his memory.
Why? Because completing his dream makes me feel connected to him. Bedrock. The motivation is love and duty.
It is the exact same physical action, the exact same boat, but the neurological experience of that journey will be completely different.
Right. The first sailor will be miserable every time a wave hits because their ego is threatened. The second sailor will find meaning in the storm. Intention dictates the experience.
And climbing down that Y ladder is how you strip away the OEOs and begin to uncover your true Dharma.
Dharma is such a massive concept. It's essentially the intersection of your passion, your innate skills, and your usefulness to the world.
But there is a specific phrasing regarding Dharma in the text that completely flips our modern corporate philosophy on its head. It states, you can't be anything you want, but you can be everything you are.
That is deeply countercultural. We are force-fed this narrative that you can be absolutely anything if you just grind hard enough.
Which completely ignores our innate biological and psychological parameters. Society is obsessed with fixing weaknesses. If a kid brings home a report card with 3 A's in art and literature and a D in calculus, where do the parents focus all the tutoring money?
On the D, always. We spend our lives trying to become mediocre at things we are naturally terrible at.
The monk mindset demands the exact opposite. Stop agonizing over your weaknesses. Double, triple down on your inherent strengths.
There is a brilliant insight from Sister Joan Chittister, a Benedictine nun, who suggests that our limitations are actually profound gifts to the community.
Right, because if you were perfect at everything, you would be an island. Your inability to do calculus creates the space for someone else whose dharma is math to shine. Our limitations literally mandate human connection.
Which brings us to the archetypes of dharma, or varnas.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, human energy falls into specific categories. You have the guide, who seeks truth and distills knowledge.
You have the leader, driven to organize and protect, and you have the maker or creator, energized by inventing and building tangible things.
Recognizing your archetype is just about noticing what gives you energy versus what depletes you. But, okay, here is the real-world collision.
Let's hear it.
I do the life audit. I use the Y ladder. I figure out my varna is the maker, my dharma is to be an artist. But my immediate reality is that I have a mortgage, kids, and a 40-hour-a-week job at an accounting firm. I can't just quit and go paint in the woods.
No, and you shouldn't. It's only depressing if you view dharma as a specific job title. Dharma is an energy signature, not a resume. You don't have to quit.
So what do?
You engage in what psychologists call job crafting, or stretching your dharma into your current environment. The framework points to Leonardo DiCaprio. His primary dharma is communication and performance. He's an actor. But he stretches that exact same skill set into his environmental advocacy.
Or the example of the corporate lawyer whose true dharma is nurturing and creating. Baking, basically.
Right. She doesn't resign from the law firm. She stretches her dharma by baking intricate goods for her colleagues, fundamentally changing the emotional ecosystem of her office.
So if you are a natural leader trapped in a boring data entry role, you don't just suffer in silence. You volunteer to spearhead the office charity drive. You find micro opportunities to express your innate energy.
Exactly. But here's the catch. Stretching your dharma like that, swimming against the current of demanding life, requires an immense amount of bandwidth.
You cannot run that kind of high-level operating system if your daily routine is a chaotic mess. You have to physically and temporally restructure your life to support that energy.
Which leads us nicely into the mechanics of routine and environment. The governing rule here is incredibly profound. Location has energy, and time has memory.
Time has memory. I love that. The framework suggests using the TIME morning routine. TIIME, thankfulness, insight, meditation, exercise.
But the prerequisite for this routine is waking up an hour earlier than you currently do. And this is exactly where people fail.
Because you can't just sleep 1 hour less. The cognitive decline will ruin you. Waking up an hour earlier means you have to steal that hour from your evening.
And mathematically, that is a neurological trade-up of epic proportions. Look at the circadian biology. Most people stay up late scrolling feeds or binge-watching shows, claiming they need to unwind.
But physiologically, Between the hours of roughly 10 p.m. and midnight, the body undergoes a massive release of human growth hormone, or HGH.
Yes, this is the critical window for cellular repair, metabolic regulation, and cognitive recovery. By staying awake to consume junk media, you are interrupting your body's peak restoration window. You're trading cellular repair for cheap dopamine hits.
If you shift that hour from the late-night void to the early morning, you aren't just gaining time, you are actually optimizing your biology.
And once you optimize the morning, you have to protect your attention during the day. Monks are fanatical about single tasking.
Which is funny because we wear multitasking like a badge of honor in the corporate world. But the cognitive science is completely damning.
Oh, absolutely. There was a famous Stanford University study on heavy media multitaskers. These are the people constantly toggling between emails, Slack, reports, and news tabs. The researchers assumed these people would be phenomenal at filtering information.
But they found the exact opposite. Heavy multitaskers performed way worse on cognitive control tests. They had diminished working memory, and they were chronically distracted.
They were paying a massive cognitive switching penalty. Every time you shift your attention from a spreadsheet to a text message, your brain has to completely reconfigure its neural networks. It burns glucose and exhausts your executive function.
And only about 2% of the population, these so-called supertaskers, can actually do it without performance degradation. The rest of us are just training our brains to be scattered.
To combat this, the monks practice absolute radical immersion in the present task. There's this Zen practice detailed in the text that sounds almost absurd at first. They are instructed to chew your drinks and drink your food.
Right, it sounds weird, but it's the ultimate exercise in sensory presence. Drinking your food means chewing solid food until it literally becomes a liquid, forcing you to slow down.
And chewing your drinks means you don't just gulp water mindlessly while staring at a screen. You take a sip, you hold it, you feel the temperature, and you swallow it with intention. It drags an automatic function back into conscious control.
It's about breaking the habituation of the brain. When we do something every day, the brain puts it on autopilot to save energy.
The monks intentionally disrupt this. They were given a daily exercise, walk the exact same path around the ashram every single day, but find a completely new stone, a new leaf, or a new shadow that you have never noticed before.
It proves that routine is not the enemy of discovery. A structured routine actually lowers your baseline cognitive load, which frees up the bandwidth to notice the profound details right in front of you.
And that intentionality must extend to our physical environment, which brings us back to location has energy. We operate best when we have clear spatial anchors.
But modern living kind of destroys spatial anchors. Like, if I live in a tiny studio apartment, my bed is my office, it's my dining room, and it's my movie theater. How do I manage location energy in one room?
Through rigorous microcompartmentalization, the brain associates physical postures and specific locations with specific neurochemical states. If you lie in bed and answer stressful work emails and then watch an action movie, you've anchored cortisol and adrenaline to your mattress.
So when you try to sleep, your brain is just confused. It doesn't know what neurochemical to release.
Exactly. Even in a tiny apartment, you must delineate. You only work in this specific chair. You only eat at this corner of the counter. You never ever bring screens into the bed. You must curate those anchors.
The framework also emphasizes curating your auditory environment. Sound design for your life. We constantly bounce between dead silence and jarring sirens or alerts. We let default ringtones dictate our nervous system.
We really do. The monk mindset suggests intentionally programming your soundscape. Waking up to a gradually swelling piece of instrumental music instead of a blaring alarm, or playing specific ambient frequencies while working to anchor the brain into a flow state.
Structuring the physical space and sensory input is the external architecture. But the internal architecture, how you actually govern your reactions, is where the deepest work happens.
And this brings us to one of the most brilliant psychological models from the Upanishads, the chariot analogy. It maps ancient philosophy onto modern neuroscience perfectly.
The human experience is a chariot. The physical chariot itself is your body. The 5 horses pulling it are your 5 senses. The reins connecting the horses to the chariot are your mind. And the charioteer, the one holding the reins, is your intellect, your prefrontal cortex.
It is a flawless representation of the human nervous system. If the charioteer, your executive function, falls asleep or gets depleted from decision fatigue, what happens?
The horses take total control.
Right. The horses are your amygdala and sensory organs. They are highly reactive. They seek instant gratification. They smell a bakery or see sweetgrass near the edge of a cliff, and because there is no intellect pulling the reins, they will drag the entire chariot off the cliff just to get the sugar.
You cannot rely on willpower in the moment of temptation. Willpower is a finite resource. If you wait until the horses are already sprinting toward the cliff, you've lost.
The charioteer must proactively steer away from the cliff long before the horses even smell the grass. It is about managing your environment so you don't have to constantly battle your impulses.
The framework also models this as the parent-child dynamic within the brain. The monkey mind is the impulsive, dysregulated child throwing a tantrum in the store for candy. The monk mind is the pragmatic, loving adult who says no because it will ruin your dinner and hurt your health.
And the ultimate proof of this internal regulation is the thermal heat study conducted on monks versus non-meditators. This data point is just staggering.
Walk us through it.
They brought in subjects, strapped a thermal heating plate to their forearms, and placed them in brain scanners. They told them, in 10 seconds, this plate is going to heat up to a highly painful temperature.
So the countdown starts. What happens to the non-monks?
The moment the countdown started, the pain matrix in their brains lit up like a siren. The amygdala spiked, cortisol flooded their system. They were experiencing massive anticipatory anxiety. They were neurologically suffering the pain before the heat even touched them.
They were suffering in the future. But what about the monks?
The monks registered absolutely zero anticipatory anxiety. Their brain scans remained completely flat, completely serene during the entire countdown.
Wow.
Their brains only registered a spike when the plate actually reached maximum temperature. They felt the physical sensation of heat, but the emotional suffering centers of the brain remained quiet. And the absolute second the heat was turned off, their neural activity immediately returned to baseline. No lingering trauma, no rumination.
They successfully decoupled pain from suffering. Pain is the physical reality. Suffering is the psychological story we tell ourselves about the pain. Why is this happening to me? This isn't fair. When will it stop?
And that story is authored entirely by the ego. The framework makes a crucial distinction between the ego and the false ego. The false ego is an identity built on external validation. It's paper armor that we walk around believing is forged steel.
It feels protective, but the slightest critique from a coworker shatters it, and we spiral into defense mode.
To dismantle that false ego, the monks utilize a daily cognitive calibration. It's brutally simple. Remember 2 things and forget 2 things.
You must remember the bad things you have done to others to keep yourself radically humble. And you must remember the good things others have done for you to continuously generate gratitude.
And conversely, you must actively forget the good you have done for others, so your ego doesn't become bloated with a savior complex. And you must forget the bad others have done to you so you don't allow resentment to fester and hijack your emotional bandwidth.
But, this leads to a massive friction point regarding the concept of detachment. The framework defines true detachment as doing the right thing for its own sake, without any concern for success or failure.
Right.
If I am operating in a competitive corporate environment, and I completely detach from whether my project succeeds or fails, how do I generate the motivation to actually do the work? Do I just become an apathetic robot?
That is a total misunderstanding of detachment. The author clarifies this using a brilliant parallel to Marie Kondo's philosophy. We assume detachment means living in an empty room, owning nothing, and caring about nothing.
But it doesn't mean that.
Not at all. True detachment is being intimately close to everything, fully immersed in your work and your relationships, but letting nothing own you. You engage in the project with absolute consuming passion, but your identity is not tethered to the applause at the end.
You are motivated intrinsically by the execution of your dharma, not extrinsically by the bonus check or the promotion. You detach from the outcome, not the process.
Let nothing own you. That completely reframes ambition. And the ultimate mechanism for detaching from your own ego is to shift your entire focal point outward. Which brings us to the culmination of the monk mindset: relationships and the highest purpose.
The bedrock of any relationship is trust. But the framework argues that our modern definition of trust is deeply flawed. It breaks trust down into 4 distinct pillars. The 4 C's: care, competence, character, and consistency.
The psychological trap we all fall into is the expectation of singularity. We meet a romantic partner or a mentor, and we demand that they possess all 4 C's perfectly. We want them to be our therapist, financial advisor, moral compass, and reliable companion.
And when they inevitably fail at one of those, we feel entirely betrayed.
It is an impossible burden to place on another human being. The framework teaches compartmentalized appreciation. A senior monk might have absolute character and competence in spiritual matters, but they have zero competence in advising you on a venture capital pitch.
Or your mother might offer infinite care and consistency, but maybe she lacks the character to keep a secret or the competence to give career advice.
You must accurately map the 4 C's in your network, appreciate what people can actually provide, and stop building resentment over what they mathematically cannot.
It's about accepting the fundamental nature of the people around you. And there's a story in the sources that perfectly illustrates how hard this is. A monk is sitting by a river and sees a scorpion drowning.
This is a great story.
He reaches in to scoop it out, and the scorpion violently stings his hand. The monk drops it back into the water in pain. The scorpion starts drowning again, so the monk reaches in a second time and gets stung a second time.
And a younger monk watching this says, "Are you insane? You know its nature is to sting. Why do you keep trying to save it?"
And the older monk replies, "Because its nature is to sting, but my nature is to save."
That is the ultimate test of internal alignment. Do you allow the toxic behavior of someone else to dictate your own character? If your defined nature, your dharma, is rooted in love or service, you do not abandon your nature simply because the environment becomes hostile. You maintain your integrity independent of external variables.
And this ties into the framework's concept that love is a nonlinear circle. We usually view love as a transaction, right? I give you $1 worth of love, so you owe me $1 worth back.
But the monk perspective is that you inject love into the network, and it rarely comes back from the exact source you gave it to. You might pour endless love into a difficult child or a stubborn friend and receive nothing back from them directly.
But eventually, that energy circles back to you in the form of a stranger's kindness or an unexpected mentor.
Which leads directly to the apex of the monk philosophy, sava, or service. The highest frequency a human being can operate on is unconditional service. The text quotes an ancient proverb, "Plant trees under whose shade you do not plan to sit." Service is not martyrdom. It is the ultimate psychological healer of the self.
I have to challenge this, though, because it sounds beautiful on paper, but incredibly privileged in reality. If I'm drowning in my own life, my rent is late, my anxiety is sky high, I'm emotionally exhausted, isn't it dangerous to expend energy trying to serve someone else? The whole put your own oxygen mask on first rule exists for a reason.
Self-care and boundary maintenance are absolutely critical, yes. But the framework's counter-argument is that rumination and hyperfocus on your own suffering actually accelerates the drowning. When you are caught in an anxiety loop, your world shrinks to the size of your ego.
So service breaks that loop.
Yes, service is the oxygen mask. When you are feeling most isolated, stepping outside yourself to alleviate someone else's burden forces a perspective shift. It triggers a massive release of oxytocin, which naturally suppresses cortisol. And it proves to your own brain that you still have agency and value.
That makes a lot of sense.
And crucially, seva does not require wealth. The framework points out that monks who have taken vows of poverty and own literally nothing will scoop up a handful of water from a river, bless it, and pour it back into the river. They do this simply to exercise the muscle of giving. Service is an energetic posture, not a financial transaction.
Service is the oxygen mask. That completely flips the paradigm. So to synthesize this entire framework for you listening, the monk mindset is not about escapism. It is not about running to a mountain to avoid reality.
No, it is a highly tactical neurological operating system.
It is about aggressively clearing the dust from your identity mirror and filtering out the OEOs. It is about acting as a charioteer, anticipating the cliffs and steering your sentry horses away from the edge.
It is about drilling down the why ladder to discover your specific dharma, optimizing your physical routines to support it, and ultimately channeling that energy into seva service to the network.
And we must emphasize, the goal is not unshakable perfection. Tomorrow, you will likely sleep through your alarm. You will encounter someone who is totally unreasonable. Your monkey mind will try to grab the wheel.
The measure of the monk mindset is not the absence of friction. It is the speed of recovery. It is how quickly you can recognize the deviation, apply spot, stop, swap, and return to baseline.
It goes right back to that MRI machine at the very beginning. The monk's brain wasn't remarkable because it was immune to chaos. It was remarkable because he had built the neurological pathways to flip the switch back to calm on command without the friction.
Yeah.
And those pathways are available to anyone willing to do the reps.
To leave you with a final orienting mechanism, the framework discusses death meditation. It's the practice of viewing your current life from its inevitable endpoint to clarify your immediate priorities.
It's a powerful thought exercise.
It pairs this with the reality that everything in nature exists in a state of continuous service. The sun provides heat without invoicing us. The trees generate oxygen. The water quenches thirst. They simply execute their nature.
So as we close out this deep dive and you step back into the chaos of your day, consider this. If your specific existence, your unique set of limitations and strengths were treated like an element of nature, what exact shade or warmth are you uniquely designed to provide to the ecosystem of your home, your office, or your community? Don't just wake up and ask what you want to extract from life today. Ask what life is demanding that you provide.